and welcome back to the Murder She Wrote Rewatch podcast. I'm your host, Previ. We're going to be talking about the next episode in the Murder She Wrote rewatch that I've been doing, Birds of a Feather. And, oh, it's a doozy of an episode. Things begin rather spectacularly with one of our guest stars, who happens to be none other than Martin Landau. That's right, Martin Landau himself. The Oscar-winning character actor. He has been in a lot of stuff. Way back in the day. We're going to scroll all the way back and have a look-see. What has he all been in? The Goldbergs TV series. The original Goldbergs TV series. 1953. Let's see. Schlitz Playhouse. Maverick, the TV series. Lawman. Tales of Wells Fargo. He was Doc Holliday in that. He was Court in the Rawhide TV series. What else is there? Shirley Temple Storybook. Wow. 1960. The Law and Mr. Jones. Oh yeah, all kinds of stuff. Larry Coombs in The Untouchables. The Outer Limits TV series from 1963 to 1964. He played a couple people in Twilight Zone. Alfred Hitchcock. Oh, he's been in a lot of things. The Wild Wild West, General Grimm. He played it in that. The Man from U.N.C.L.E. He was in that. Mission Impossible. He was Roland Hand in several episodes of that. 76, actually. Oh, my. He's been in a lot. Huh. He was in the Get Smart TV series for an episode as Maxwell Smart. Interesting enough. Gunsmoke. Oh, yeah, he's been in a lot of stuff way back when. Okay. Apparently there was a TV movie called The Harlem Globetrotters on Gilligan's Island. I did not know that. What else has he been in recently? He was only in the one episode of Murder, She Wrote. This one. But he was in... Let's see now. We're getting into the 90s. So there might be some things here that you guys know him as. Ed Wood. The movie Ed Wood. 1994. He was Bela Lugosi in that. He was in the television series of Spider-Man, 1995 to 1996, as the Scorpion. He was in... Where is it? Sleepy Hollow. Peter Van Garrett is uncredited. 1999. The Majestic, he was in that. Hollywood Homicide, if anyone's seen that one. He was in 2006, The Evidence TV series, Dr. Saul Goldman. Here we go. Here's some stuff that you guys probably know about. Entourage, the TV series. He was Bob Ryan in that. He was in Without a Trace as Frank Malone. He was the great Raymondo in The Simpsons in 2011. And... that's about the only ones here that I can see more recent than you guys would have known. But Martin Landau, he plays Al Drake in this particular episode of Murder, She Wrote. And you see him, the episode kind of starts panning away from Alcatraz, showing the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge, and you see Al Drake jogging along in this absolutely horrible, just horrible, horrible brown, beigey brown, velvety jogging suit, I guess. Oh, it's horrible. He's jogging with a German Shepherd by his side, and this dude gets out of a car in a white suit and goes to try and talk to him, and he just jogs right past. The dude that tries to talk to him, you find out his name is Howard, because he's trying to talk to Mr. Drake here about his money that he's owed, and he's done a lot of things for that money, and he wants what's coming to him, and they have a bit of a confrontation. Mr. Drake gets all angry and almost sicks his dog on him, but he's all like, "Don't you ever touch me like that again!" And he keeps running off down the parking lot, leaving poor Howard all by himself. When he gets to his car, somebody else is waiting for him. Not quite as dressed up, very casually. They have a little bit of a conversation. The guy's name is Mike, and he's wondering whether Drake's going to hold up on his end of the deal. And apparently they've got some business going as well. And there's a bit of a confrontation there as well. He basically says that things are going real good for him right now, Mr. Drake does, and that he can live without Mike here. And Mike gets in his face and pushes him. Mr. Drake tries to sick his dog on him, but Mike basically growls at the dog and runs him off. Then from that scene we cut to a young woman. But before we talk about the young woman here, let's talk about Howard. And then we'll get to the young woman. Howard, the actor who plays him, Jeff Conaway, apparently passed away, sadly, 2011. Jeff Conaway. He was in a few things. I don't think, 90 credits. It's not bad. He's had quite a particular, former child star, Dickie Roberts. Jeff Conaway, let's see here. That's where I've seen him before. I knew he looked familiar. Babylon 5, the television series. He was apparently Zach Allen in the TV movies and the television series of Babylon 5. So those of you out here who've seen Babylon 5, if you remember Zach Allen, that's Howard in this episode of Murder, She Wrote. He not only played Howard Griffin, Howard Griffin, in Birds of a Feather, but he also plays Howard Griffin again in another episode in 1986, 2 years later. And then he played two other characters in 1993 and 1994. So that's kind of interesting that he plays the same character twice. There's not a lot of that I've seen so far. He's been on The Bold and the Beautiful. Apparently a movie called Bikini Summer 2. And other things. He's been... what's this? Wizards and Warriors, the TV series. Prince Eric Greystone. Is that what I think it is? Wizards and Warriors? Huh. I'm not sure if it's actually live acted or not. Maybe. Happy Days. He was Rocco in that, I guess, for an episode. No idea. But the big one, of course, is the Babylon 5 that you guys would know about for sure. Little Zach Allen. I knew he looked familiar, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. So that's Howard. And his girlfriend, who we see, is this one, I believe. Jeannie Francis. I believe that's her. She plays Victoria. And she's been in, The Young and the Restless and General Hospital for, Laura Spencer, Laura Baldwin for 1977 to 2016. Wow. Young and the Restless, Genevieve Atkinson for 2 years. What else has she been in? No. The Incredible Hulk TV series, 1996, as Betsy Ross. So the 1996 one, if you've ever seen it, Betsy Ross, this is the one. Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, 1995, was Amber Lake. What else has she been in? All My Children. She's been in a lot of soap operas. And Murder, She Wrote, of course. Victoria Griffin. Victoria Brandon Griffin. And Victoria Brandon. So yes. Victoria Brandon is her name in this one. Victoria Brandon Griffin in 1986. She played it. And Victoria Griffin in 1990. So she plays the same character 3 times. On Murder, She Wrote. And I think, now that I'm talking about it, now that I've remembered, just to let you guys know, I'm starting a little bit of a tally here on Murder, She Wrote, the Rewatch podcast, to kind of keep things going. We've got two different tallies. We've got the murder tally, whereby we've got, currently, there's been 2 murders in New York, in and around, basically. In the New York area. We've got 1 murder in Cabot Cove, Maine, and we've got 1 murder in San Francisco. Or is it Los Angeles? I think it's San Francisco, is the Golden Gate Bridge. In San Francisco, we'll say. So we've got that. But we've also got Jessica's relatives. Because as I remember, she's got a lot of relatives, and I kind of want to know how many. So in the first episode, we saw Grady. Jessica's nephew. And in this one, Victoria Brandon, played by actress Jeannie Francis, is playing Jessica's niece. So that's another relative. So we've got 2 relatives so far, and currently we're going to be at 4 murders for this, for 3 episodes in. So let's get back into it. As I was saying, we see Victoria and the priest discussing things, kicking around in the church, and the poor put-upon priest is looking a little bit because Victoria is very much one of those type of people where it's just he's immediately talking about having fixed one mistake, and he's like, we've got these flowers here, and she sneezes and is like, I'm allergic to flowers. And the priest wants to get a run through of things before things go on, because Howard is going to marry Victoria, and things are getting interesting because just as they're about to start running through, his pager goes off, and he's like, I gotta go, I got a client, blah blah blah, And they start having a bit of an argument because it's like, not again, you've been doing this constantly. And and the poor priest ends up going. He's giving the guy serious side eye here, because she sneezes. He pulls out a handkerchief and gives it to Victoria, and you can see there's like red smeared lipstick on it, and the priest sees this and starts giving him like serious, like, really son, you're doing this, really, trying to lie your way out of this. Anyways, they have this conversation and argument, and Victoria's not stupid. She sees the lipstick as well and gets all angry and stomps off. And then we see Jessica and Victoria in a restaurant, and the waiter is basically like trying to get them to pick a lobster. And Jessica, being from Maine, she's like, "Are you sure these are East Coast lobsters?" She's like, she doesn't believe it, and he's trying to convince her by going, yes, of course it is. They're flown in fresh this morning. And Jessica's like, well, maybe they're jet lagged. It's like, we'll take the first two that move. She's got that down home charm going about her. Everything's better down east, sort of thing. So she, they go and head to their table, and Victoria's like talking about Howard and that she does love him. She really does, and it's like she's trying to convince herself. And Jessica sees this, so she kind of gently prods, and you end up finding out that there's been like late nights, and that found this handkerchief with the lipstick on it, and the books of matches from this strange club. And she's just like I can't spy on him, because that's what Jessica suggests. She just straight up suggests we should go to this club and check it out. We should do that. And of course, Victoria is just like, when she shows him the handkerchief with the lipstick, Jessica is immediately like, well, that's not your shade at all. So it's like, we need to check this out. And she's like, how can I spy on him? And Jessica's answer is, for your own peace of mind, you have to. So 50-year-old woman is just like, yeah, go ahead. Let's spy on your would-be husband to make sure he's not cheating on you. Then we cut to the club, and you see a woman dancing on stage, not very well. You can't really hear what the woman is singing either. It's all very vague and in the background. And we see a couple of interactions, because Mr. Drake is there at the club, and he has an interaction with I believe his wife, or his assistant. I think it's his assistant, actually, if I remember. He has a little interaction with her, and then in comes an agent of one of his entertainers. They have a little bit of a confrontation. Nothing too serious. He just tries to be the smoozy agent. He's like, come on, you gotta do this. My guy's got talent. He's getting offers from every place, and he shouldn't be stuck playing this rinky-dink little club. And Mr. Drake basically says, now you listen to me. He plays here, he don't play anywhere, because I've got his contract. And then Jessica Fletcher and Victoria come in and try to get a seat from the get a table from the maitre d. After saying they have no reservation, he's like, "Well, we can seat you at 11 next Thursday," and walks away. So that is when Victoria notices the little poster thing of Al Drake, your host, and sees him talking with someone. So she just goes right over and talks to him, and basically is using Jessica Fletcher's celebrity. Basically, like, that's my aunt. She's a famous celebrity. She writes mystery novels. She's got 6 books published, and he's just like, I've never heard of J.B. Fletcher. So after she explains that she's got all these books, Mr. Drake just kind of walks away over there and greets Jessica as if he knew who she was, and then tells the maitre d' to find a table because he's a club owner. Just because he doesn't know who a celebrity is doesn't mean that other people don't know who a celebrity is. Very clever. So he gets them a table. They don't get much of a table with a view of the stage, but they do get a table with a view of everybody else, which is fine, because that's who she wants to look at, is the other patrons, to try and catch Howard out. Then we've got a guy on stage who comes out and introduces a comedian who's sitting at a set of drums, doing his own rim shots, basically. And he starts telling jokes. He's got a beard. He's got a bit of an afro going on. A small one, not a big one. And there's some... you find out, because the agent's sitting there, and he's all like super happy and excited, that's the client that he was talking about, who has the contract that Mr. Drake won't let him out. So they have this wonderful little scene where you have the guy up on stage telling jokes. Rather comedic. Then you see Al Drake's wife come in. And the maitre d' kind of ask, does Mr. Drake know you're here? And as soon as he gets a table for her, he's immediately calling up Mr. Drake, and is like, "Yeah, your wife's here." Or he tries to. Yeah, he tries to call Mr. Drake. That's what it was, but he can't get through. So he gets one of the waiters, and he's like, "Go tell Mr. Drake his wife's here." And on the way back, the waiter runs into the assistant lady, who Mr. Drake was kind of flirting with earlier, a little bit. And he's going to go into Mr. Drake, but she waves him off and is like, "Don't worry, I'll tell Mr. Drake that his wife's here." And then we're back out front again, listening to the comedic stylings of the wonderful comedian on stage, who I should probably get a name for here, because there it is. Freddie York is the guy's name, played by Gabe Kaplan. Now, what's he been in? Not a lot. He hasn't been in a lot of actual, like, acting. Yeah. As an actor, he was in, like, The Love Boat, Police Story, Fast Break, Welcome Back, Kotter, as Gabe Kotter. Oh. Oh! Okay. So yeah, he was in Welcome Back, Kotter as the titular Cotter, Gabe Cotter, uh, for like 4 years. He was the teacher. He was Stuart Lewis in Lewis and Clark, the TV show. And he was in the one episode of Murder, She Wrote as Freddie York. And a couple other things. But those are like the big ones that I think he's done. And I think he also was the writer. Yeah, he was the creator of the TV series Welcome Back, Kotter, as well as the main actor. Very cool. Very cool. So yeah, Gabe Kaplan, he was Freddie York, this wonderful comedian playing his own drums. Very, very charming and whatnot. And we've got the fact that he's on stage finishing up his set and he's talking. Jessica and Victoria are still there. The announcer guy on stage comes out and announces who everyone's been waiting for. Some lady's name, Michelle something or other. I can't quite. And the lady that comes on stage is a man dressed up as a woman, aka a female impersonator, is up on stage and singing. And just before the song begins, there is a scream, and another woman comes running out, chased by the assistant lady, who ends up running through the club, getting caught and like falls over on a table. And the woman is Howard. This woman that was being chased and called a murderer was Howard. In a wig and a dress with lipstick on. Because he was a female impersonator at the club. Like the other guy. And of course, Victoria is like, that's Howard. And Jessica's like, wait, what? Howard? And the neat thing that I like about this episode is that while they do have like a couple female impersonators in this club, the one guy there, Mike, who was doing Michelle, and Howard, who was playing pretending to be another woman here on the stage and whatnot, despite the fact that this is happening and that this was done in like 1984, I think it was. Yeah, October 14th, 1984 is when this episode aired. Now, 1984 was a bit of a different time, but this show never really... Like, this episode, it didn't make fun of them. It didn't make fun of this profession of being a female impersonator on stage. It wasn't something that was there for derision or that any of the characters in this episode heaped any derision or any scorn on any of these people for. It was just, this is a fact. This is what they're doing. This was the job that they had. And that's really the end of it. And I like that. That was really interesting to me. Because I was very, very young in 1984. But I know that it wasn't that widespread of a thing. Especially not on television to see a lot like this. So it's definitely kind of interesting. The next thing we see is the police swarming around. You find out Al Drake's been murdered. Howard is being kept in a room and guarded by the security officer. Victoria tries to get in to see him. Basically it's her fiance in there, and she's like, you can have my purse and hold on to it, and I'll only be a few minutes. Uh, and the nice security guard lets her in to talk to her would be husband, and things are kind of. There's a nice little moment. The guy's standing there holding the purse, and then he's like, he's realizing he's holding a purse, and he's like, no, just set it down. And you see Victoria and Howard kind of make up because she's just happy that he wasn't cheating on her. She doesn't really care that he was being a female impersonator and wasn't really working for an insurance company like he claimed he was. She's just happy that he wasn't cheating. So they go and have some kissy time. And while they're doing that, the detective comes along, and the detective ends up opening the door on them kissing, and is like, "Which one is it?" And it's like the woman is like, "Which one?" The tall one. Now the detective is an interesting guy because he is Detective Lieutenant Floyd Novak, played by Harry Gardino. And Harry Gardino has been in a few things. Virile Brooklyn-born actor Harry Gardino with dark wavy hair and a perpetually worried look on his craggy-looking mug. That's actually IMDb. Oh, God. So what do we got here? I believe he passed away in 95. His last acting role was in 93. But he's been in Murder, She Wrote a few times. Once as Lieutenant Floyd Novak. Twice as Haskell Drake in 86 and then again in 91. And then once in 93 as Danny Cochran. So it's got some space between it. He was in an episode of Cheers as Frank Carpaccio. The Human Target TV series in 92. Oh, that was like way back in 92. Yeah, that was... that was before... that was not the one that I saw. What else has he been in? Jake and the Fat Man as Jake Stiles Sr. He was in The Law and Harry McGraw, the spin-off of one of the characters in Murder, She Wrote. He was in an episode of that as Spinelli, I guess. Hawaii Five-0, Johnny Mio, Commander Wallace, Mike Martin, Sergeant Sims. He was in a few episodes of that. Police Story. Simon Penrose in the Wonder Woman TV series back in 78. Hey, he was in a lot of stuff back in the day. The New Perry Mason TV series in 73 and 74. He was Hamilton Berger. So he was in quite a few episodes of that. Probably all of them would be my guess. Monty Nash TV series in 71. He was Monty Nash, so that's something, I guess. Some of these I haven't even heard of that he's been in. Just kind of scrolling here and seeing. So yeah, he's been in a lot of stuff back in the day. Not a lot up in present day that you guys might know of. But good old Harry Gardino here, Lieutenant Novak. He is an interesting character. So what else? What's happening? Well, he goes into the actual crime scene where a bunch of people are gathered around. Mr. Drake is shot in the chest, and he asks some questions as about if anybody's seen it. And the assistant says he saw Mr. Howard standing over him with the gun in his hand, and when he screamed, the guy dropped the gun and ran. So they get the gun, and he gives it to his partner to get dusted for prints. And then Mrs. Fletcher speaks up and asks Lieutenant Novak if he noticed the small white feather on the Mr. Drake's jacket. And of course, he immediately is like, "And who are you?" And she's like, "Jessica Fletcher." And he's like, "Did you see the murder happen?" She's like, No, I was out in the watching the acts on stage when it happened." To which he's like, "Well, good, Mrs. Fletcher, would you do me a big favor?" He's like, "Would you get out of here?" So he basically sends her packing. Then we skip to see Lieutenant Novak in the police station, getting a statement signed by Freddie York, who doesn't seem all that worried that he's now the person holding his contract is now dead. So they get a statement signed, and he answers a phone call. And as he's on the phone call, Jessica Fletcher pops her head in. And he basically kind of winces and he's like, "Go away." He kind of has this waving his hands, "Go away." And she comes in and tries to talk to Lieutenant Novak. And he's like, "Mrs. Fletcher, please, I'm tired. I want to go home." And Jessica basically threatens him right then and there. Threatens the police officer. And because she basically says, "I'm tired too." It's like, I had a scheduled appointment to be on a television show and I canceled it to be here. So if you're not going to give me some time, well, I'll just reschedule that appointment, and the first thing I'll talk about is the lack of sympathy of the San Francisco Police Department, and basically lays out a threat to him and gets him to divulge some information to her. Just bulldozes over the man. And she brings up the fact about getting his hand, Howard's hand, tested for gunshot residue. He's like, you've of course tested it, right? And he's like, "We haven't gotten to it yet." So she basically, "Well, you better hurry, because after a few hours that test doesn't become any good. It's worthless." So he gets brought into Howard gets brought in to speak to Jessica, and gets hit on by this large black man in a leather vest and a cap and sunglasses. So Novak goes and leaves and gives Jessica and Howard some time to talk, and she asks Howard if he killed Mr. Drake, to which he of course denies it, and she's like, "Oh, good." It's like, we've only had one murderer in the family, and that was back in 1776, which is a wonderful little line. So they have a nice little heart-to-heart conversation, and you end up finding out why he held the gun, because he walked into the office after his act to talk to Mr. Drake and stepped on it. Didn't know what it was because it was like dark in the office, and picked it up and is like, "Is this yours?" And he's like, "Mr. Drake, you gotta talk to me." And he spins the chair around, sees him dead, and is like, "Oh shit!" And that's when the assistant walked in and screamed, and he dropped the gun and ran. And that's what happened. So then you see Lieutenant Novak. He ends up answering the phone, talking to Mrs. Fletcher again, letting her know a couple things. Poor put on Lieutenant Novak. He ends up talking to his partner. He has a wonderful line. He's like, What is it about that woman that makes me nervous?" And his partner's like, "I think she's cute." It's interesting. She has a little talk with the agent of Freddie York, because she goes to the club, and he's basically like offering his services as a manager, or an agent. To which she's just like, "Nope, already got one." And you see a little argument between a couple of the people, the new owner of the club, the Al Drake's wife, and the maitre d' and the announcer. And then she has an argument with Mike, who was going to buy the club from Al Drake. They have an argument and storm off. Only you find out it was all just for show, because they are now, once they're in their in the dressing room, there's some kissy face that happens there. Jessica's looking for her and ends up stumbling into Freddie York's particular room, and has a little conversation with him about how he got negotiated this room with a view. And Jessica kind of is looking out the window at Alcatraz and notices the upholstery on the settee, the little couch thing that's sitting by the window, which becomes important later on. And then she leaves and goes on her way, and she witnesses the assistant getting fired by the wife, the owner. And Jessica, oh Jessica. As soon as the assistant walks out the back door of the club, Jessica's there in a cab waiting and is like, "Do you need a lift? That looks heavy." "Don't worry, my treat." Just in order to get alone with her so she can talk and find out some stuff. That is like super clever. And of course, Jessica overheard her getting fired, but plays off that she doesn't know. Just plays like this dumb, basically. And they have a nice conversation, because she ends up getting the assistant to spill some dirty little secrets about how the contract with, I think it was a contract with Freddie York, is a personal contract, in that the wife is having an affair with this one, and this was happening, and that. She knows all the little gossip going on. She ends up finding out these little details that help her later on. And they agree to keep it a secret between them. And then you see a meeting between the wife and Mike, aka Michelle, and they have a wonderful little talk down by the waterfront. Both of them eventually asking, "Did you kill him?" He's like, "I wouldn't care if you did, but did you?" And they're both like, "No, I didn't do it." And they hug. Although it shows close up of both of their faces while they hug, and they're both kind of like, I don't know if I believe him, or I don't know if I believe her. It's one of those moments. Next thing we see Jessica going back to the club, and Lieutenant Novak is there. And of course, Lieutenant Novak thinks, because of the time of death, could only be when Freddie York was on stage, because the gunshot had to have been muffled by the sound of him playing the drums. So Jessica wants to prove that. So they go and fired a gun back in the room, and they heard it. And she goes and turns on a radio, gets the guy to fire the gun again, and they hear it. And Lieutenant Novak is immediately saying the only time that gun could have been fired was during his set on stage, so the drums could cover the sound of it. It's the only way. And at that point, Freddie York comes out on stage, and they're talking, and somebody tries to drop a set of lights on either Freddie York or Jessica Fletcher. Jessica's fine. Freddie takes a tumble off the stage and breaks the table and is laying there holding his neck going, ow, ow. And the next thing we see is Jessica arriving at Lieutenant Novak's home. Got the address. He's wearing a Save the Whales bathrobe. He plays what's his face? Gardino there. He plays such a put upon character. They're just like, oh God, you again. Well, you might as well come in. Would you like a cup of coffee? And he's like a nice man, but he doesn't. He actually owns a cat, and Jessica's like, oh, look at the darling, and picks up the cat. And Novak is like, he likes you. He's like, he doesn't like anybody. And Jessica makes a comment that, he's a lot like his owner in that regard. And she wants to talk to him about the case some more, because there's something still bothering her. So they have a wonderful little discussion, whereas he seems almost nice in this point, but he's still just kind of like, come on, just let us do our job here. We see Howard in court getting made bail. And then Jessica goes and talks to the wife, Al Drake, who is at a driving range driving golf balls. And she knows about Jessica Fletcher. She knows that Jessica is poking her nose into things. There's a little bit of, almost a little bit of hostility there, maybe, between those two. Then you see the agent and Freddie York in the hospital, and they're both drinking champagne, and Freddie's got this big old neck brace on. And she comes in and has some questions. Just has a couple of questions for Freddie York. Even though, ostensibly, she's only there to wish him a speedy recovery. The agent's very antagonistic in this scene to Jessica Fletcher. And is very, very basically asking and answering the questions for her. And she has a wonderful little bit after the agent has his say. She's like, well, the Lieutenant Novak thinks maybe somebody was trying to kill me and not Mr. York. So, oh well, I'll just leave these flowers here, and goes on her way. Then you see her trudging up to her hotel room with Howard and Victoria, and there's construction going on literally in the room next door. And she's like, there's something I can't put my finger on it just yet, but I'll surely figure it out after a good night's sleep. And she looks dead tired in this scene. She's like, I'm just going to go and get a good night's sleep. He's like, how can you sleep with all this racket? I can sleep through Armageddon, she says. So she wishes those two a good night and goes into her room and basically flops down on the bed without even bothering to take her clothes off. Of course, as she's trying to get to sleep, the hammering and the sawing is still getting to her, so she goes and grabs her pillow, puts it around her ears, and you see her like that for a second or two, then her eyes pop open as she's realized something. She's like, oh, that's it! That's it! And she jumps up and runs to Lieutenant Novak's house. And is like, I know who did it. I can prove it. And what she figured out was that they used a pillow, a silencer, to muffle the sound of it. So they go and look at all the pillows, and there's a pillow in the room now that wasn't there originally, according to the photographs. There was no pillow. So somebody took a pillow from another room because they used the pillow in the room to muffle the shot. And she knows which one. She knows exactly which one. Even though Lieutenant Novak is like, have you looked in all these rooms? All the pillows are the same. To which Jessica says, no, they're not. This pillow only came from one room because Jessica noticed something. So they go and confront the killer. And who that killer is. But before they go and confront the killer, she goes to the stage and has Lieutenant Novak stand on stage and not move. And then she drops a sandbag on him. Or attempts to. Because she tells him not to move, and he moved. He's like, if I hadn't moved, I'd have gotten clubbed. And she's like, because you heard it coming. And that's when the killer pops out. Bobby, or Freddie York. He's the killer. And she figured it out. Because the pillow that he took from his room and put in to replace the pillow that he used to muffle the sound from Al Drake's room was sun-faded. And his settee was the only one that was sun-faded because it had a window in his room. And she goes and presents all the evidence and gets a confession out of him in front of the detective. And as always, her the way she sets things up is like perfect. She gets the confession out of him. It's really interesting. Can't give enough credit to Mr. What's his face here? Mr. Gabe Kaplan for the acting job. It was good because apparently he had like a 7-year contract personally to Al Drake, and Al Drake just wasn't letting him out of it because he's a big name, and he's like, well, I'll keep him here in my club so he can't go anywhere. There's a really cool line he has saying that he basically Drake gave him a shot to actually play at the club, which let him get big. So he's like, he gave me a shot, I gave him a shot. bit of a joke there, but the way he delivered it, it wasn't like he was finding it amusing. It was kind of like almost desperation. Very, very interesting. So it was a wonderful little ending scene. And then we see Howard and Victoria getting married, a few people from the club, and Jessica. Very small wedding. And, of course, Lieutenant Novak's there, asleep. And Jessica has to nudge him. There's congratulations from the club, from the people that are there. And then he gets a phone call, or not he gets a phone call, the agent comes in and basically is like, I can get you a shot on in this movie. And he was like, no, he was going to get another job, like just a normal job doing real estate. This is a normal job doing real estate. So Victoria at that point is like, well, this is the chance of a lifetime. I've got to support Howard, so we're gonna go for that. And Howard asks Jessica for advice. It's like, well, what do you think I should do, Miss Fletcher? And it's a wonderful little moment right at the end, because you see Miss Fletcher and you see Lieutenant Novak behind her, and Miss Fletcher is like, well, I don't usually give advice. And as soon as she says that, you see Lieutenant Novak wince like he's just heard the biggest lie ever and shake his head. He's just like, oh, this woman's going to be the death of me. He just has that look. But she's like, well, I don't like to give advice, but I say go for it. And there's a big hug, during which there's a freeze frame, and it goes to the credits. And the day has been saved by Jessica Fletcher once again. Happy day, happy day. It's a wonderful little show. I'm loving it more and more the more I watch it. So that is that episode done and in the tube, in the can, as it says. Next episode, you guys can look forward to Hooray for Homicide. When she protests, when her book is turned into a tacky B-grade horror movie, and later winds up on the suspect list when the producer is murdered. So Jessica herself is going to be the suspect. Interesting. This is the first time that's happened. Yes. So join me on the next episode of the Murder, She Wrote Rewatch podcast for that. Thank you all so much for watching, listening, etc. As always, if you like what I'm doing, please give that like button a tap. Give that subscribe button a tap as well, if you haven't already, so you can be kept apprised of when I do new videos. And throw a comment in the comment section. What do you think of my Murder, She Wrote Rewatch podcast? Are you watching as well? What do you think of Jessica Fletcher, the brassy woman from Cabot Cove, Maine, who just bullies and blusters her way around? It's fantastic. I love it. So do all that. And until next time, my friends, you all take care and keep enjoying your mysteries. I really need to think up a better ending for this. I really do.